Hey guys, it's Chef Mullins here. We're going to talk about product purchasing today. This is a little bit longer topic, but it's a much needed much needed topic. Whether you're going to be purchasing in the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, or in just your own life, you may need some of these product purchasing tips and suggestions that will make your life much better, much easier in the future. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is talk about the course objectives for this one. So the objectives are: state the objectives of an effective purchasing process. There's about 5 or 6 of them or so. Define quality and review purchasing procedures that help ensure that operations obtain products of the proper quality. Describe basic procedures for determining the quantity of products purchased. Identify concerns important when selecting product vendors. Explain basic product ordering procedures, and describe basic payment methods and the management of credit memos and petty cash funds. So why is purchasing important? First off, we have to define what purchasing is. Purchasing is a series of activities that begins when needs are determined by the menu and ends after products are served. It includes things such as an emphasis on vendor interactions. Its definition is broader than the common idea of purchasing. Simply means buying, determining purchasing quantities, placing orders, and paying vendors. Most experienced professionals in this aspect know that there's a lot of planning that's required before you ever buy something. So what are the objectives of an effective purchasing process? So here you'll see the whole idea of a purchasing laid out in a flow chart. We first have to determine what our purchasing goals are, why we're buying this product in the first place. So we ask ourselves a series of questions. Is this the right product or service for us? Does it make sense on our menu? Is it one of those things that we can apply to our menu that we're looking for? Maybe if it's I'm looking for cheese, I need to specify what kind of cheese. Is it from the right source? Am I buying this from Cisco or US Foods or a local vendor? Is it the right price? So you may find the right source, you may find the right product, but the price is wrong. In the right amount, we want to make sure that we have the correct amount of product that we're purchasing or the level we're purchasing to bring it up to what we call the par level. And then at the right time. So I don't want to buy this food if it's going to sit on the shelf for a long period of time. I don't want to buy it if I'm not going to have enough on it. I'm going to buy it if it's coming in late and it's not going to help me. So there's a lot of aspects for that. And then who does this help? It helps the customers and it helps the operations equally. So purchasing responsibilities, you've got a couple of different kinds of purchasing. First, you have to talk about centralized purchasing. This is a system in which purchase requests are routed to those with specialized responsibilities who then purchase the products. So we may give our entire purchase request to one individual and they purchase all of the products for us. This is called a buyer. And they would purchase all of our products for us. Or we can do a decentralized purchasing process. And this is where we have multiple persons or a group of persons that are tasked for this aspect, or the one person could be tasked to do it and they use from multiple vendors. Why is this important? First, or how do we get to this point? We have to determine the products that we have to purchase. The easiest way to do this is look at your menu. What do you have on your menu? What is going to be the seller on that? Let's say, for instance, you have a hamburger on your menu, a cheeseburger. I mean, who doesn't like a good cheeseburger? I say good. I'm looking at you, McDonald's. I say good, not you. You go back over there. But I love a good cheeseburger. And what makes a good cheeseburger to me is the cheese. I like my cheese to be melty and rich and creamy, but I don't like cheese that's going to be firm and got a snap to it on a cheeseburger. That doesn't make any sense. So maybe I'm going to buy an American style sliced cheese. Not all American cheeses are alike. Some are easy melting, some are more plastic, So you really have to know what you're purchasing in that particular case. Determine in that case, once you determine that, you're going to develop a specification. We call this a product spec or a product specification that's going to detail out the exact item that we want to purchase. And it's not going to leave any room for ambiguity. We want this item and nothing else. By buying it that way, we're going to get what we want, and we're going to get what we pay for. So a good example of a product specification, we'll get into this a little bit later, is this. This is for bacon. It's going to give a lot of information in here, such as the name of the item, alternative item names, a brand name, maybe we want a specific kind, the weight of it, who the suppliers are, quality specifications, packing specifications, and delivery specifications. All of this are part of that particular product specification. We'll get into more detail about that later. Once we determine that, we want to review our purchase requisitions. These are requests to purchase products required by departments. So you may work in a small environment where you don't have purchase requisitions. But if you're going to work in a hotel, if you're going to work in any kind of bigger operations, you're going to have to provide a requisition to your purchaser who will buy that. Otherwise, they're not going to buy it unless they have a piece of paper saying, please buy this. Determine correct purchase quantities, how much of it you need. If you buy too much, it's money sitting on the shelf. If you buy too little, you may run out of product. Also, with buying too much of it, if it's perishable, it's going to go bad. There were a couple of years ago, there was a Geico commercial that had the stack of money with the googly eyes on it. Tell me who's watching. That's what I think of every time I think of overbuying product. I don't think of this as food and stuff on the shelves. I think of it as fat stacks of cash staring at me going, why'd you buy me? Why'd you buy me? Determine the purchase method, such as the direct purchase or competitive bidding. I may want to bid one competitor against the other. Maybe, for instance, I'm looking for a specific product. I want to look at U.S. Foods and compare it to Cisco. As long as they are comparable and acceptable product substitutions for each other, then it may come down to price for that. And then prepare requests for proposals, RFPs. This is what we're going to send to a vendor and request from them a pricing on that particular item. And it might come down to who's the lowest bidder on that. Some other purchasing activities require direct interactions with the vendors, such as interviewing possible vendors and collect and analyze information to determine which among possibly many vendors will be sent RFPs. So I may want to visit their warehouse and look and see how they store things, look and see how they rotate products. Any vendor that won't let you do that, do not buy from them. Communicate with vendors to obtain product information. We want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples when we do things like that. If I'm buying apples, if I'm buying Granny Smith apples 88 in a case, then I need to compare it to Granny Smith apples 88 in a case. Send RFPs for approved vendors. Then review vendors' proposals, including their price, their contract information, their ability to provide orders in a timely manner. All of these things are going to be reviewed. Send purchase orders out once we determine who we're going to buy from. And then we're going to expedite product deliveries. Expediting refers to the interacting with the vendor about POs that have been placed for which the products have not been delivered yet. Use proper product receiving practices. This is very important. You want to make sure that someone signs that invoice. So when I receive a delivery, I go line by line, checking the products in. I check quality, I check quantity, I check temperature, all of these things on products, because if I'm putting my name on that, if I'm signing my name to that invoice, then that means I'm accepting ownership of that. And by doing that, I'm accepting all the rights and responsibilities for payment for it too. So I want to make sure I'm getting what I'm paying for. If someone comes in, let's say, for instance, I had a situation a few years back where a vendor came in, they dropped the delivery there. It was several $1,000s worth of product. They dropped the delivery and never got anyone to sign for it. I could have very easily have told the company, hey, you know what? I never got my delivery. And the delivery driver's going to be, oh, but I dropped it off there. I'm like, but did you get it signed? No, you did not. And then, of course, take corrective actions when delivered products don't meet your standards, whether that means sending it back or whether that means having to hold it off until someone can come pick it up. There's a lot of different corrective actions. Sometimes I'll refuse deliveries because of the condition of the delivery. There's an old saying that you get what you pay for, and it's generally true in purchasing as well. You really have to be a very watchful person when you're dealing with this because you don't want to uh, pay for something that doesn't fit your requirements. So because of that, we are very detailed in that particular aspect. So we look at quality. That's one of the biggest things we have to check on. Yes, we need to know quantity. That's very, very important, but quality is just equally important, if sometimes not more so. Some buyers make a decision about quality when they see products delivered by a vendor. Then the only way to resolve a quality problem is often to reject the inferior products. So if you are looking at product from the standpoint of a reaction, then your only goal is to reject that product. So we want to be a little more proactive with it. Purchase specifications are there to define quality. That's what their goal is. It also has to do with quantity, but quality is a major factor in that. Purchase specifications describe the quality requirements of the products that are purchased. This helps to ensure the use of staff and managers and vendors have the same understanding about the quality needs. So if I tell them I want a New York strip loin, then if I just say a New York strip loin, I'm going to get three different companies tell me three different things. But if I tell them I want a New York strip loin, 13 and up, that means 13 pounds and more, a 0x1, that means a 0 fat cap on the back, a 1-inch fat cap on the front. So now I'm being more specific. So what goes into a purchase specification? First off, brand or trade name. If I want a specific style of, let's say, ketchup, maybe I want Hunt's ketchup only or Heinz ketchup only. I don't want generic. I need to specify that is my specification. Or I may put in a certification with industry specifications like the NAMP, which is National American Meat Processors Association. They produce something called the Buyer's Guide, the Meat Buyer's Guide. I may use that. For an example, I may use the number 1185. So I may tell them I want a 1185, which is a bottom sirloin butt steak, meeting specific quality standards that's identified. Aside from that, you may have to be very, very purposeful in your description of a product. So you be careful with the description. You want to make sure that it's spot on. So there are a lot of products like fresh seafood, meat, and dairy products that can't be identified by a brand name or a trade name. And you have to be written on there specifically what it is you're looking for. And then use of samples. Samples of product currently used by an operation may serve as a specification. So, for example, a manager may want to buy ready-made specialty bread products, and samples prepared by the establishment may be provided to possible vendors for evaluation. So they may come into your operation and say, okay, now I understand what it is you're looking for because I've seen it with my own eyes. And they can go through their catalog and they can make a recommendation of buying this product as opposed to any other product. And you do that for your competitor bidders as well. So they can come in and give you an estimate of what product it is they're looking for. So how do we develop specifications for our industry? Well, first and foremost, you need to know what it is you want to sell. If I'm going to make a Reuben sandwich, then my product specifications are going to include a rye bread. That's going to include some kind of Thousand Island or Russian dressing, or the components to be able to make that dressing. It's going to include a nice Swiss cheese, corned beef, sauerkraut. All of these things are going to be needed, but I need to specify specifically identify what it is that I want to purchase. Not any rye bread will do. If I purchase rye bread, I may one time get the deli slice, which is a thin slice, or I may get the thick cut slice, or I may get marble rye, or I may get any number of things. White bread with a little bit of rye seed on it, caraway seed on it. So this is not what I'm looking for. I want to specify what it is I'm looking for. After potential vendors are identified, that's the first step. Managers can obtain information and product samples for evaluation. A lot of times they will, if you want to know what it is their product is, they'll bring it in and let you look at it. It's called a cutting, so you can see what that product is. Or they may compare several different products, bring in several different products for you to look at. Employees will use the product, will know about its intended use. Obviously, if you're going to give it to the kitchen, let them work it out and figure out what works. In the example of the Reuben sandwich, certain breads may not hold up as well as others do, so you might want to look at it from that standpoint. The next step is to develop a draft version of the specification. General information from vendors and trade organizations, along with specific characteristics, can help with that as well. Then you want to, I follow the rule of threes. We talked about this before. I'm going to give it to 3 people or 2 people plus myself, and we're going to go through that and make sure that it is accurate for whatever operation we're doing. So it's a complex world out there when we're talking about ordering and we're talking about product specifications. So you want to make sure that you're doing the best you can with that. Get as much information as possible. So here's an example of a product specification sheet. This is a way that you can do it. You can also, again, use the one that I was showing you earlier, which is a style of product specification that is going to give you a lot more information. You look at different ones. So for instance, this product specification, this is for, on one side, you got chicken. It's in the group poultry. It's chicken, broiler, 1.2 kilograms per with skin on, which is going to be an alternative name, whole chicken with skin, or it may just be called WOGS, WOGS. It's whole without giblets. Maybe you want specifically Tyson chicken. So this is where you would specify where you'd put that. The weight of it, 1.2 kilograms with skin, that would be the minimum weight. You may have a maximum weight as well, so you don't overdo it. And then quality specifications. In this case, the chicken should have a bright off-white to pinkish skin. There should be no bruises or cuts on the chicken skin or flesh, and the entire bird should be intact. The breastbone should be springy, and the flesh should be firm and moist. The chicken should not have any of its parts drying up, as it indicates that the bird is not fresh. The meat should have been cut halal style. Weight should be 120 grams, 1,200 grams. Packing specifications should be received in clean food grade plastic packaging and should not have blood or water in the packet. Should be fresh chilled, or maybe you want them to come in frozen. There's all different ways that you can specify that. And then delivery specifications. This is something you need to work out with your delivery companies as well. On arrival, the receiving personnel shall ensure that the meat, etc., are brought into clean, hygienic, and temperature controlled environments on a tote box or a refrigerated van, or should be chilled by ice or in an ice pack. So while you're thinking about product specs, I'm going to put a link in the course shell for this particular website. It's nothing special, but it'll give you a good idea of what product specifications look like for the real world environment, and it will provide you with a ton of information. Maybe you want to construct your own. You can do that and keep it as a file. So when you're purchasing, you're going to have something to refer back to. So how do we determine how much to purchase? This is one of the biggest things that you can do. It's one of the most complicated things that you're going to do as well. And the reason for that is the idea of having too much on the shelf. You're spending too much money. That's money that can be capitalized and used in other applications, or spoilage, or running out of products if you don't have enough. So this is really important when it comes down to what happens if you don't have those right things. You're going to end up, let's say you end up with excessive quantities on hand, then that ties up your working capital. You can't buy other things in that case. It affects your cash flow, the money you need to pay bills when they're due. More space is used up in this process. There's a lot of risk of theft as well. So for instance, if I have too many beef tenderloins on hand at any one given time, maybe someone straps a beef tenderloin to their leg and walks out of it. Trust me, that has actually happened to me, where someone came in with a roll of duct tape, dropped their pants in the middle of the walk-in, strapped a beef tenderloin to their leg, and then pulled their pants up and tried to walk out of the kitchen and go to their car. Now, I kind of noticed they were kind of pimp walking as they were going out, so I caught them, but that's not always going to be the case. Um, Also, the quality will deteriorate over time for some products if they're perishable. And then handling costs increase as well. For example, additional time is required to conduct inventory counts. You're going to do inventory on a regular basis. Some inadequate quantities, what happens in that case? Well, that's pretty, self-explanatory. You can't meet the production needs. You run out of product. If you run out of, filet mignon on a Friday night, good luck finding it for the weekend. You're not going to have enough. You may need to revise your production plans, or possibility of disappointing customers is the worst. But even worse than that is the loss of sales and revenue. So, how do inventory levels impact purchasing quantities? A physical inventory system involves manually counting the number of each product on hand. This has to be done to obtain cost of goods sold, which is also known as food cost, which we'll get into later. Information for the monthly income statement as well. Some managers require someone other than the person responsible for the inventory to conduct the physical count to ensure that there's no conflict of interest or control problems, such as theft. Here's an example of a physical inventory form. You can see the green beans here. It'll tell you the purchase unit, how we buy it. That's really important. You want to identify that. And then the easiest thing to do is to create a spreadsheet when you're doing this. I go top shelf all the way down to bottom shelf, left to right, and then I'll go to the next shelf and work my way around the room. So in this case, green beans, it's purchased by the case. There are 2 cases in the kitchen. Then the purchase price is $31.50. 2 times $31.50 is $63. That gives me a total inventory of, in this case, $503. That includes all the other stuff that's on the inventory as well. That's just not shown on this particular diagram. In a perpetual inventory system, it's a little bit different. A perpetual inventory system is a continuous count of the number of items in an inventory. This is done through automation in many cases, but also through purchase requisitions. You have to make sure that you are keep account of those requisitions. Let's say, for instance, you're working in a big hotel operation. You may have a purchasing department that you go, if you need something, you write out a requisition for it, you give it to them, they take it off the shelf and give it to you. And now that's taken out of inventory. And they know through a computer modeling of what they have and what they don't have. They'll still do a physical inventory, but they'll do it less often. Another good way of inventorying is steak counts. So in a restaurant, this is very similar to what we would do on a daily basis. We would start off with our numbers at the beginning of the morning. We always want to verify that what we have at the beginning of the morning is what we had left over at the end of the night from the previous shift. So in this case, I count and I've got 5 steaks left over. So then I take those 5, and you can see I've got 5 total for the day. Well, I know I need more than that. My prep list tells me I need at least 20 steaks for the day. So that means I prep 15. So now I've got my 20 steaks for the day. I work my day all day long. And then at the end of the day, I count, or even the end of the shift, it could be, I count my steaks again. I've got 2 steaks left over. That tells me that I sold 18 steaks, physically sold 18 steaks, or physically utilized 18 steaks. I go to my product mix, which is part of my POS system, my point of sale system, and I look up those steaks, and it tells me, let's say, for instance, I sold 17 according to the POS. That means that I have 1 steak unaccounted for. Now I have to dig around, I have to figure out where that steak is, and I have to determine, was it a miscook? Was it a waste, or was it something else? Then I would carry that number over to the next day. Ideally, when I come in the next morning, I should have 2 steaks on hand, because that's what I had at the end of the day here. If I don't, then that's another problem altogether. That means somewhere between the end of the shift and the beginning of the shift the next day, there was a miscount, or there was something that happened. Maybe there was one that was bad, you had to throw away, couldn't be used, or whatever the case may be. You need to account for any of this in what we call the manager's red book or the manager's log to identify what was the problem. And so there's nothing that can be called back upon you to say, hey, why didn't you take care of this?
Min-max is one of the earliest automated replenishment methods, which is now used across almost every piece of inventory software on the market. Its roots can originally be traced back to around the 19th century, where it was developed as a visual method where you could physically see the amount of stock in a carefully sized bin. The idea was that once stock reached a certain point, this would trigger a replenishment, which would bring the stock back to its maximum levels, without the need for ever counting the exact amount of stock that it contained. Well, the approach is built on two conditions. Initially, we start by tracking the current stock level, which is typically the sum of stock on hand plus the sum of stock on order for every single SKU. Then, when the total stock reaches a minimum value, the system automatically alerts the user, and a subsequent reorder is placed targeting a specific maximum stock level. If we assume that these replenishments are immediate, then the amount of inventory in relation to the min-max looks a little like the graph you can see here. So the main benefit of a min-max approach is its simplicity. However, don't let this fool you. Choosing the levels for our min-max is anything but simplistic, and this is where dragons can lie. Now, if lead times were immediate, then in reality most businesses would reduce their minimums to just 1 unit in order to save storage costs. However, in reality, the longer the lead time becomes, the higher that minimum level has to be in order to account for things like delivery delay. So by adding this lead time to our graph, we can recognize this. Then, it's worth bearing in mind that one of the core assumptions of a min-max concept is that the environment is static with the constant demand and lead times. Now, of course, we know that this is far from reality, as lead times may be extended, or demand may be bigger or smaller than first predicted. And this can all potentially result in a stockout. Now, of course, business leaders are aware of this and adapt their minimums according to the uncertainty that they have in their business and the relative importance of a product. Typically, an ABC analysis approach can be applied, with A products having higher minimums and a greater safety margin. So whilst appealing with simplicity, the challenge of the min-max world is that the underlying assumptions of a static, constant world can give a false sense of security. As each individual SKU has its own economic characteristics, there are an awful lot of factors which need to be combined to get any sort of rational min-max level. And this can only be properly accounted for through a dynamic approach, which is constantly refined based on the latest information. As such, without any prioritization about the overall importance of a product or an appreciation of the impact of related products, the min-max method should be treated with caution and used as a starting point rather than a final solution.
So let's look at PAR inventory system. Now, this is one of those things that's going to be a lot less complicated than the minimum maximum inventory system, and it's used routinely every single day, even by tool pushers like myself, who, even though I have a minor in mathematics, I got it from Mississippi State, Cal College, so it doesn't really count for anything. So I'm going to show you how we do this, and it's a very simple way of doing this on I would call this napkin ordering. This is very simple.
If you've never heard of par levels before, join the club.
That's our maximum allowable product. That's how much we need to have on hand to run the business. So let's look at a par level instead. Par levels are going to give us a much better, much easier way of determining the product that we need, but it's a lot simpler than using the minimum maximum level of inventory. Now, your par level may be different depending on the time of the day or the time of the week. Let's say, for instance, I order twice a week. I'll order Monday for a Tuesday delivery, and I'll order Thursday for a Friday delivery. I know that my usage is going to be much higher on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday than it would be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So my par level for the latter half of the week is going to be a little bit higher for some items than it would be in the early part of the week. We would create a spreadsheet for this. We've got our cases available. We've got our cases used before delivery. And then that's going to give us our number of cases to order. So now all we have to do is go down the list. Obviously, this would be name over here, product. And we go down the list and we say, okay, on X product, we have 6 cases. This is our par. This is how much we should have on hand at any one given time. In this case, now we go and we've got 6 cases or 3 cases on hand. This is how much we have on our shelves. We know we're going to use an additional 2 cases before delivery. So the math is done here. 3 cases minus 2 cases is 1 case. So if we've got 1 case left on the shelf when the delivery shows up and our par is 6 cases, that means that we need to order 5 cases. Sometimes you don't even have to factor in this dude right here because you built it into your spreadsheet already by making sure your par level is adjusted for that loss. So how do we select vendors? So what are some of the other factors of determining supply sources? Well, their reputation. That's one of the biggest ones. I mean, do they have a good reputation in the industry? We're going to look at it and we're going to see, okay, yeah, they have a good job of being able to produce with other companies. They have a good reputation out there. If they don't, if their name is mud, we're not going to work with them. Trade publications, you may find them in trade publications such as Savoir or different other magazines like that, or maybe specific ones to a restaurant industry, QSR Quarterly and things along those lines. Electronic marketing information, again, what's available. Electronic marketing is becoming more and more important and is supplanting trade magazines and things like that these days as well. Vendor relationships or vendor representatives are really important. This relationship between them. They want to be able to speak to someone a lot of times. Yes, we can order online. Yes, we can do all this stuff remotely and stuff these days, but sometimes we need to be able to pick up a phone and call someone to help us out with it. Trade shows and other professional meetings, go to the National Restaurant Association in Chicago sometime. If you get an opportunity, it's usually in May. It is a March. It's usually in March, I believe. It is a monster show, absolutely monstrous show. And there you're going to see everything from food vendors to equipment vendors to demonstrations and conferences and seminars and all kinds of stuff. It's a phenomenal operation. Costs a little money, but it's worth every penny of it. Employees, you may have employees that recommend other vendors as well. Be careful about this. Make sure you do your due diligence. And then, of course, other sources of information. A range of vendor sources today. Buyers can purchase from many sources, while the mall managers still use traditional vendors to supply a wide variety of product lines, various specific orders. Some managers also use wholesale buying clubs and cooperative purchasing systems to fulfill their operations needs. So broadline vendors are some of those particular things that we can look at. These are more traditional style. They sell a wide range of products offered with few alternatives in each category, particularly things like companies like Cisco, US Foods, PFG, and such. Whereas specialty line vendors, will offer a much more narrow product line, but a deep selection within that line. So it may be specifically a cheese vendor, which will have hundreds of variations of cheese. So what are some of the advantages of purchasing from broadline vendors? The reduced unit costs with an increased purchase volume. The more you buy, the cheaper it becomes. This is known as economies of scale. Decreased costs for purchasing and accounting aspects for order placement. Again, the more you deal with one vendor, the less likely you're going to have to deal with multiple different aspects of accounting with that. Shorter purchasing time because the buyer must interact with only one vendor. Less time for product reviewing or receiving activities because only one vendor will be received. You don't have multiple vendors knocking down your door trying to deliver all at the same time. Reduced time needed to interact with several specialty line vendors as well. Maybe you're buying through a wholesale buying club. This is a one-stop shopping source. Also includes wholesale stores like Sam's Club and Costco. You know, there's some really good alternatives for this, really good reasonings why you might use this, but there's also some downsides to this sort of thing. First off, you're going to have to go get it and load it and unload it yourself. And it's not feasible to buy a whole list of things from something like that. So you may want to have it delivered in that case. So these are some opportunities for, I would call this a supplemental style of purchasing. I wouldn't use this as my primary purchasing model. Cooperative or pool purchasing. This is a really good thing. Let's say, for instance, you have a food truck company, and maybe you are a food truck warehouse that houses multiple food trucks in it, like a commissary style. You can get into a cooperative or a pool purchasing system to where you all come together and buy your product from one vendor or multiple vendors, whatever it might be, and share the cost of that product across the board. As long as there is written contracts, be very careful not to have, you want to make sure you have a written contract of who's responsible for what, how much of it, so that way there's no argument about, well, you ordered a whole case and you only needed two things and I needed two things, and who's going to pay for the rest of this? It needs to be very clearly defined early on whose responsibilities are what. The ordering process occurs when the buyer makes specific commitments to a vendor for a specific purchase. Managers must do several things as they prepare to place the order, including decide whether it's better to make a product or buy a product. Sometimes I buy Caesar dressing. Don't tell anyone. I don't always make it. Determine what to buy if you're going to buy it. Determine the quality of the item and how much of it to buy. So these are all problems you have to work out in advance. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a little bit of issues. So what are some pricing concerns in this case? There's four primary factors that influence the prices that buyers pay for a product. One is the idea of prices reflecting product costs. They have to be comparable for what you're going to get. I use the bag of potato chips as an example. You buy a bag of potato chips with the expectation that you're going to get a full bag of potato chips. And then you get it and you open it up and you're all sad that it's only about 3/4 of the way full. It's a bad analogy because really that's in there purposefully to prevent the potato chips from getting crushed. It's added air in there. But whatever, we're going to roll with this analogy. But you want to make sure that that cost is going to reflect what's in the bag. Second, prices reflect consumer demand. I'm sure you've all seen on menus something that says market price. Well, that means that the higher the demand, the higher the price. Prices reflect vendor provided services and information. So receiving a low price on a product that's not delivered when needed is not a bargain at all. Yeah, okay, I paid a very low price for it, but hey, I never got it. So what's up with that? And then lastly, prices reflect vendor quality. The vendors with a reputation for quality food and outstanding service can charge more for their products than vendors that are not dependable. Never buy shrimp from a guy named Vinny who drives an El Camino pickup truck. That was a bad weekend. We'll just leave it at that. So what are some of the things that affect the prices? Maybe the vendor's cost of delivering an item can affect the price as well. Now we see the gas prices are relatively high, and they have been for quite a while. Ever since that has happened, we've had fuel surcharges that have been put on a lot of things. So we get charged for delivery in many cases. That used to be built into the model. But once you get a surcharge on something, it's very hard to remove a surcharge. Even when the prices of fuel go down, we don't ever expect stuff like that to go away. Vendors may add extra costs of carrying slow pay accounts as well. So it may be a situation that if you're a slow pay account, it may not affect you as much as if you have 100 slow pay accounts. they may have to build in that little cushion to make sure that they're getting paid, despite the fact that multiple people haven't paid them yet. Other things that you can think about, discounts and rebates and how they're going to affect. A lot of vendors offer discounts on their products, which are deductions from the established price that buyers normally pay for the products. They're offered to selected buyers based on some characteristic or action. Buyers should ask about any discounts offered by the vendor so they can pay a low net price for that particular item. There's several types of discounts. Prompt payment discount. If you're one of those people that pay on time all the time, they may give you a courtesy discount. This is something that's a premium for you. A quantity discount. Maybe you're buying 500 cases of something. Of course, they're going to give you a discount on that. For that, that's just economies of scale. A customer status discount. FedEx gets a better rate on boxes than does, say, Walmart. Why? Because FedEx moves more boxes than Walmart does. And then special discounts or promotions. These discounts may be associated with holidays or seasons or events. They can be offered when the seller wants to be clear inventories of any slow moving or discontinued products as well. These are all potential possibilities for discounts. Rebates and discounts are offered after a purchase have been made at a normal selling price. So rebates come after the purchase, discounts come before the purchase. So how do we apply that? Well, let's say the normal price of a case of something, whatever it is, 6 number 10 cans, is $42. We subtract out the seller's 2% prompt payment discount, so that's beforehand, that's 84 cents. We take into consideration the manufacturer's after purchase rebate of $3, and that tells us that we're paying $3.84 less than what we would have paid, which gives us a net price of $38.16. When we do our inventory, this is the price that we want to use for our inventory, not the $42, because that's going to give us a bad read. That's one of the reasons why we track all this stuff, is for the purpose of inventory. So let's talk about product ordering basics. Let's get down to the brass tacks of ordering stuff. When we're talking about, let's first talk about small operations. Small operations typically use ordering procedures like, maybe the person responsible for purchasing are identified. It's a very small operation. Maybe it's the owner manager that purchases everything, or the chef or the beverage manager or the dining room manager are the ones that are purchasing things. It's typically someone that is ground level, that is familiar with the product on a regular basis. Department heads can spend or up to a pre-approved established limit, or department heads may make basic purchasing decisions, including the quantities of products needed. Large operations have a whole set of logistics associated with them, and you can see here that it extends from the individual that is responsible for purchasing. Maybe that's a purchasing storeroom staff member. They supply a purchasing requisition to the purchasing department. They send out requests for proposals. Maybe they have to get 3 vendors to submit a proposal to them. They take the price quotations and they determine which one is the best based on price and quality and quantity. And then they send it back to the purchasing department, who will submit the purchase order to the vendor. And then once it comes in, the receiving staff will check all that in. Man, that's a complicated process in there, but it's a lot simpler than it looks. It's something that happens cyclical, and it's over and over and over all the time, constantly. So what does a purchase order look like? A purchase order looks more like this. This gives an example of what we're looking from. So it's going to have where to ship it to and who it's purchased from. So sometimes you may even have a where it's shipped to and to whom it's shipped. This is really important. You want to make sure that the name of the company on there, of who is supposed to receive it, is on there. The PO number needs to be on there. The PO date needs to be on there. That's the date that it was ordered. The delivery date needs to be on there, the late, obviously, receiving date, who the contact person is, and the terms. So in this case, the terms refer to net 30. That means you have 30 days from the time you receive it to pay the bill. And then you're going to have the actual purchase items down here. So the item name, the quantity, how it's being purchased, that's by the case or by the bag, the purchase unit price, and then the total price is the purchase unit price multiplied times the quantity. And you might have a bid number out there as well. The total price on here, who the buyer is, signed, dated, and then any terms that are on here are going to be outlined as well. Expediting procedures. Sometimes the managers need to expedite deliveries because of problems caused by purchasing requisitions, or when the inventory management error occurs. Maybe they didn't have enough. Maybe they thought they had enough, but they had a run on it the next day or so before the product came in. Weather conditions, strikes, vehicle loading errors are all examples of vendor-related reasons for delivery delays. Purchase follow-up. We want to make sure that when we purchase something, we've got some procedures in place to be able to follow through with that purchase. And that includes everything from payment. We want to make sure that everything is accounted for. Every penny counts in the operation. In restaurants, in particular in restaurants, we operate a very slim margin of profit. We may eke out 1 to 2 to 5% at maximum of profit. That means for every dollar we receive, 1 penny or 2 pennies or 5 pennies go to profit, if we're lucky. So every penny counts in this particular case. So why is it important for documenting these sorts of things? Well, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. That's as succinct as I can put it. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So we have to have a purchase order, and we should also have the invoice that comes in, and we should be able to compare those two. Payment methods, you can pay by invoice. That means as soon as it walks in, you write a check. A lot of times this is called cash on demand. Or you may have a term limit on it. You may have a term of net 30. You have 30 days to pay that. Or you can pay by statement. This means that they will issue you a statement for the entire amount that you owe over a month, maybe, or over a specific period of time. Most supply houses prefer you to pay by invoice because that way they can compare the invoice to the order, to the payment. It's also good for the accounting department to do the same thing, but it's also simpler to do the payment by statement. So there are some upsides and downsides to both of those. Here's an example of a sample vendor statement. You've got the invoice number on here, the delivery date, the amount due, any adjustments that are made, like a credit is issued due to whatever the problem may be. The credit is notated as a credit memo and is given a number so you can compare it back as well. And then finally your total, and this is due upon receipt. So this is an example of how you would receive a vendor statement. Typically, most vendors are going to either issue you one of these once a month, or sometimes you have to request it depending on the kind of vendor you've got. Other purchasing issues, credit memos. We talked about that very briefly. Credit memos involve any kind of pricing changes that need to be fixed, a back ordered or a short wait or count, or any items rejected of unacceptable quality. A lot of times this is taken care of on the ground level, where we may reject something and we strike it off the invoice and they will fix the invoice for us. Or they may have to issue us a credit memo in that particular case as well. So we keep track of that. But a lot of times you may get a 0 on a product for the amount delivered. In that case, that just means that the product was zeroed. You're not going to get charged for it. No credit memo is needed in this particular case. You're just going to have to order it again or find another source for it if they can't bother to keep it in stock. Petty cash purchases. Typically, we're going to keep an amount of petty cash on hand if we have to run to the grocery store and buy something, we want to keep that. But a check payable to petty cash should be written to establish the initial petty cash fund. If you're gonna do that, you always want to start off with a bookkeeping. T accounts are going to be your best friends in this particular case because you want to keep track of what kind of cash is being spent out of there. When purchases are needed, cash is removed from the cash bank, and a petty cash voucher for the amount of money and removed is placed in the bank. So if you're calculating your petty cash should equal the amount of money, the actual physical money in the bank, plus any vouchers. So petty cash is the amount of money in the bank plus any vouchers. A petty cash voucher is a slip signed by a person responsible for the petty cash funds that authorizes the withdrawal of the cash from the fund for a purchase. Essentially, this is an IOU. The change from the transaction and the purchase receipt are returned to the manager, who confirms that the amount, that's the cash change plus the receipt amount, equals the amount removed. When more money must be put in the petty cash fund, another check is written payable to petty cash. So this is how you replenish the petty cash. At any point, the money available in the petty cash fund plus the amount of all documented receipts should equal the original amount of money allowed for petty cash. So if you think about it, it's petty cash plus purchase receipts equals the total petty cash fund. If I have a petty cash of $500, I have $200 worth of cash amount in there, I should have $300 worth of purchase receipts. So I know this has been a fairly long chapter. There's a lot of information in here. There's going to be some supplemental information that goes along with this as well. So digest it as much as you can, as easily as you can. Read the book, highly recommend it. And particularly the summaries. Go through the summaries on each one of these and you will be much better off. It will help you study for the final exam. So we will see you guys on the next one.